Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody else in between, I'm Ashton Gene Lewis. This is the Broke Boys Sports Podcast, and yet again, I find myself only talking about the NFL. We're breaking down Week 3 of the NFL, and we're actually going to preview Thursday Night Football, drop a prediction on that, because I don't want to do loose thoughts tomorrow, honestly, man. It's been a tough week for a multitude of reasons, a lot of it having to do with rewatching every single game, because on Sunday I had so much shit going on. I didn't get a chance to watch any games live, which is really tough, because a big part now, especially now for like the modern day NFL football fan, is being able to enjoy stuff while it's going on live and being on Twitter or being on social media platforms, mostly Twitter, to be honest with you, just because it does the best job of delivering clips, videos from people who are really smart professionals and people who are also really funny, and also, you know, catching up on stuff. You get raw information, you get people's thoughts and opinions as it's going on, you get a chance to go back and forth or interact with people and stuff like that, have a great time while you're doing it. And sad to say, it's the only reason that like Twitter is as prominent as it is. It's because it absolutely kills it in that category pretty consistently. So we move on. Got a lot of stuff to get through, and I gotta play basketball at like 7 p.m. It's 6:40 right now, so I got to power through this, and we're going to do that right now. So we're going to start off with the category that is the only fantasy category of this entire show. It is a combination of things, and actually I put the wrong person on here because I just realized that right now. Sorry. The Nuke is the the recognition of an absolute monster of a regular season game or regular season week for an NFL football player. And this week, I will tell you right now, this is the wrong person, but I still have it on here because his game was still insane as well. 18 catches, 215 yards, and 1 passing touchdown thrown. That was for 49 yards to go along with it. So this actually wasn't even close to the best fantasy performance this week, and still some of the games were kind of boring. Keenan Allen murdered multiple records on Sunday for the LA Chargers. When they went up against the Minnesota Vikings at home, he killed it. But honestly, it was Devon Achane, who, if you're unfamiliar with this show, I used to be a high school sports reporter, and I used to cover Devon when he was in high school at Fort Bend Marshall, is how people colloquially refer to it, but it's called Marshall High School, named after Thurgood Marshall in Missouri City. Marshall is, for a long time, has been one of the better athletic schools. They've produced a bunch of college-level athletes and some guys who have made it to the NFL as well. The most recent being Devon Achane, who went to Texas A&M for a couple of years, toured up there, and then made his way to the NFL. But yeah, he was the absolute nuke this week because all of his yardage was on the ground from rushing yards. But if you were in a PPR league and you got traditional receiving yard counted, Keenan Allen was pretty high up there, especially considering it was like consistently throughout the course of the game and all that kind of stuff like that. But yeah, no, the nuke could have been multiple people. It should have been Devon Achane, who I'm imagining is going to get a few more carries starting next week for the Miami Dolphins. We'll see. But yeah, we move on. Let's go to Streaks, Peaks, and Ditches, the part of the show where I talk about streaks that are going on in the NFL, absolute peaks, and sometimes ditches. We actually have our first ditch of the entire season so far. It only took us to week 3 to come up with a terrible stat about some teams. So let's take it from the top. Number 1 on the list, we got peak. Keenan Allen has the most games with 15 catches in the history of the entire NFL. He actually broke like a 4-way tie that he was in with some random football players who probably were really good as well. I just didn't look up the rest of the stat. Anyway, 15 catches. He actually had games with 15 or more catches in it, right? He had 18 catches in a singular game. Kind of insane. I think he caught the last pass that was thrown in this game when we get to talk about the Minnesota Vikings game a little bit later on. Streak, the Saints are the only team in the NFL without a drop, and it's very funny because the reason that they don't have drops is because they're towards the bottom of the league in pass attempts in general, and it's a sign that Derek Carr and Chris Olave and Michael Thomas and a bunch of other guys, Rashid Shaheed, doing their job. Jameis Winston now doing their job, but for the most part, it's because they don't throw the ball all that much. But it is still an interesting fact that the Saints do not have a singular drop, but they have been dropping a ton of L's lately. Anyway, ditch. In this one, like I said before, this is the first bad stat we got the entire season. The Vikings have 9 turnovers And we've only played 3 games. 7 of those turnovers are fumbles. And in the LA Chargers game, they almost had their 10th one, and it would have been another fumble. But luckily, there was a very important elbow that was down before it went completely off the rails. So we go to our streak here, and I think this is the last one I got on the list. The Bills beat the Commanders 37-3, and I put this in streak because I have no plans of talking about this I have no plans of really talking about this again very much when we get to this game because there wasn't much to talk about. 37-3 is the biggest margin of victory for the Buffalo Bills versus the Washington team in whatever iteration it has existed. So they've kicked the shit out of them. They've played them, I think, 16 times in total, and they beat the crap out of them on that one. Yep, that is the last one for streaks, peaks, and ditches. We go to our Week 3 breakdown. Actually, if you didn't see it there for half a second, I'll explain what that was. We have 4 different categories that we break down everything into. We start off with the snooze fest, which are the games that are super boring, absolute snooze fest. Like, if you fell asleep watching it, totally understand. Perfect napping material. There was a lot of games in the snooze fest category this week, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on. We also have the heartbreakers category. These are the games that either broke the heart of the fans or broke the heart of the team that were important this week, because heartbreaker categories is usually when your season goes down the drain for the most part, and it's a little early, but every single week we have to put a team in those categories. So we have the oh my category, where we talk about a game that kind of raises your eyebrow and you're like, what the hell's going on here? Is this the start of something new, of something real that I never knew? Anyway, and then there's the this is what we're here for category. These are the games that you watched this past NFL weekend that are the type of games that make you want to remain a fan of the NFL in general. And then on top of that, it's probably the kind of game that you watch and it makes you into a fan of football as you watch it later on. So we'll take it from the top. The snooze fest category, the Pittsburgh Steelers took on the LA Raiders. If you did not watch this one, congratulations to you. It was part 1. It was Sunday night. Yeah, it was Sunday Night Football. 23-18 was the final score in this one. Jimmy Garoppolo and the Raiders really offensively have been struggling mightily to even score. I will say this fake stat of if you watch NFL football or just pay attention to the NFL world in general, they get to a point, usually later in the season, where they get like these oddly specific stats that are like, oh, he's got the most receptions for a wide receiver who wears his cleat on his left foot that's bigger than the cleat on his right. They have those kind of categories, right? In this one, Davante Adams became, I think it was the all-time leading scorer in the NFL for red zone touchdowns, which you tell me. I don't count that as like a real stat. Red zone, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't feel like it's a real stat when you're just like specifically touchdowns in the red zone. I get it. The windows in the red zone are significantly smaller, thus making it more difficult to obtain them. Also, it is kind of a sign that you've been on a team that moves the ball pretty well and doesn't depend upon big plays to be able to come up with touchdowns, but it's kind of weird to be like specifically in the red zone, no wide receiver scored more touchdowns than Davante Adams. Other than that, outside of that part of this game, Najee Harris getting hurt, Kenny Pickett still riding the struggle bus despite the fact I got a Steelers fan that is in my life, and he was getting a little uppity with me about the Steelers and about how, I said at one point I felt like Jimmy Garoppolo was a better quarterback, especially now, because I still do think that Jimmy Garoppolo is a better quarterback than young Kenny. Young Kenny out here looking like a rookie. You know what I mean? Because he is. He is a rookie. I mean, essentially a rookie. He played a lot last week. He played a lot last season, but nonetheless, rookie quarterback type stuff going on here. I would like to point out 23 points, not really something you should be kind of like putting your chest out about, especially considering the Pittsburgh Steelers defense is probably top 5. I would say probably when it really is top 5 in the NFL. A lot of people kind of trying to get their jollies off the fact that Patrick Peterson keeps getting mossed on. I'd like to point out Patrick Peterson is hands down lining up against the absolute best the best wide receiver for every single team on every single play. And, big plays happen. This is how it is. Patrick Peterson's got the mental fortitude. That's why he had that role when he was with the Minnesota Vikings for a good chunk of time. And that's why I had it before when he was with the Arizona Cardinals. Like, he's got the mental fortitude to, survive that kind of stuff. Anyway, moving on. The Rams played the Bengals, and the only thing people could keep their eyes on was your boy Joe Burrow's calf muscle, which apparently riding the struggle bus, right? So, I will say the big thing that I took away from this game, and I don't really have too much to say about it because, like I said, the score is indicative of the absolute snooze fest that this game was. The Rams lose by 3, 19-16. Would like to point out the Rams offense. I think the jig is up. So, we talked about it in week 1 when they played against the Seattle Seahawks, right? We talked about the usage of heavier formations with double tight end looks on both ends so that when those guys run their routes, they're bumping and shipping defensive ends, or they're forcing defensive ends to take wider angles around the perimeter of the pocket to help out the offensive lineman in terms of figuring out which way the defensive end is going to have their pass rush commit to. At the end of the day, even if you do all that chipping and you do all the angle adjustments and everything like that, you make them line up in the wide 9. At some point, your offensive lineman does have to be able to pass block. There was major issues in this one. In this game as a whole, in regards to just the pass blocking in general for the Rams, and you could tell from like almost beginning to end that this was going to be the thing that hampered their ability to be successful, right? Their defense, surprisingly enough, big surprise for me, you lose Jalen Ramsey, somehow they found all these other really good defensive backs. And it's not just in this game with that crazy interception from Witherspoon, the one-handed interception mid-air, and basically he jacked T. Higgins while he was in the air. In terms of he mossed T. Higgins. This is the 3rd week in a row we've had a defensive player moss an offensive player, and quite frankly, I'm here for it. You know what I mean? But the defensive backs for the Rams kind of standing up, kind of looking good for a team that just lost like a true number 1 defensive back in Jalen Ramsey. Whatever. Not looking like the team that we were promised for the most part. But yeah, the Bengals grind this one out essentially because their defense is just at a ridiculous level. Dax Hill is one of many players. You talk about Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard, what they were able to do in this game, the kind of pressure they generated up the middle. And then DJ Reader has been one of the best run defenders in the NFL for the past 3 years. And hopefully people start to pay attention to that. We are going to be mentioning some other defensive tackles. Jaron Reed of the Seattle Seahawks had a really good game. And we'll talk about that later. But anyway, the Detroit Lions played the Falcons, and you can tell by the score of 20-6, it was a ton of fun. Once again, Jesse Bates, that guy. Jesse Bates and the defense of the Atlanta Falcons, somehow maybe the best Falcons defense we've seen in 10 years, which, not to be that guy, but if that's the case, the Falcons playing defense and getting a pass rush, ladies and gentlemen, we might have action with the Falcons. We might have some action cooking here with the Falcons, and especially with the NFC South looking pretty sus. The Panthers not looking great. Bryce Young did not play this week. The Atlanta Falcons, let's be real, they've looked like the more consistent team. The Saints not looking great. Also now on their backup quarterback. Luckily for them, their backup is the agent of chaos himself in Jameis Winston. So weird things are going to happen. There's no doubt about that. And then like we said before, the Panthers and the Falcons, the Hawks, it's looking like the Falcons may be division champs here. And I know it's week 3 and it's tons of time to sound like a complete idiot, but they've looked like the best team through the first 3 weeks of the season. Anyway, the Kansas City Chiefs played the Chicago Bears. And the only thing I can take away from this, I need everybody to look at me. Please stop. Please. I only get a couple of months of football a year, and very rarely do those things get interrupted. I'm not going to say what it is, because the more you speak of it, the worse it seems to get for me personally in terms of social media, in terms of like people tweeting about it and posting about it on Instagram, all the funny videos people keep making on TikTok where they ask like their male partner in their life or their brother or their boyfriend or their husband about, man, isn't it really cool that she did the thing where she helped that guy get famous, and then, somebody did that to me, and they thought they were going to get a real laugh out of it, and it just sent me down a spiral, and I need all of us to collectively agree to move on. I get it. You like her. I get it. Y'all like her music, but I don't even have a logical reason for why we need to move on. I just want it to happen. Maybe, do you like me? I'm a nice guy, I think. I have done nothing to wrong you, person on the internet. We should just stop talking about it, together, as a unit, as a group. This will be the last time that I speak about it. This will be the last time you speak about it. And I would appreciate that so much that I don't think you can understand. Let's move on. The Chiefs massacred the Chicago Bears on national television to the point where maybe they should have called the cops. This game was 34-0 at halftime, which makes all the stuff that happened in the press box above even worse. This game wasn't even competitive, so all they did was focus on it. Every single social media account had to get the flicks off, and it's hurt me a lot personally, emotionally, and mentally. Whatever. The Chiefs did the thing against the bad football team is the way that I'm gonna phrase that. A lot of this stuff with Justin Fields is maybe not having faith in the plays that are being called. We've already heard him have a pretty much open conversation about how he doesn't feel like the offensive play calling is allowing him to be creative and play his style of football, which, hey, if you're going to draft a guy that high, shouldn't you be trying to orchestrate your entire franchise around putting this guy in a position to succeed in the best way that you know how, which would be listening to him when he says he needs more creativity in the offense. But, what do I know? I'm just a dude on the internet. But yeah, man, there wasn't really much to talk about in this game. The sad part was, and you know what? I'll talk about the saddest sequence of things that happened, and I'll see if I wrote it down in a coherent manner. So, let's see. There we go. The pin. So yeah, the second half before the second half ends, the penultimate drive of the first half starts with a delay of game for the Bears, right? They then fumble the ball away. You guessed it. The Chiefs get a field goal out of that, and then the next drive they intercept the Bears and they score a touchdown to make it 34-0. So in under 2 minutes they gave up 10 points. Just putting it out there. Jesus, bro. I don't know what else to tell you. Bad times at the OK Corral, even though, do they have corrals in Illinois? Anyway, good luck to the Bears next week. I guess the worst part was the first good chunk of this game, a lot of the Bears' pressure was moving Patrick Mahomes in the pocket, but unfortunate for them, Patrick Mahomes is not a normal quarterback. So they would get to the point where they were within arm's reach of being able to sack him, and then he would run 10 yards the opposite direction, and then they would gain 30 yards down the field because they couldn't cover for 5 seconds. And that happens. That's brutal. It looked like the Bears pass rush and the Bears pressure was really good at first. It's just Patrick Mahomes kept overcoming it time and time again because the defensive backs were having a tough time holding their water against, I get it, a multitude of absolutely insane routes, including routes that are not called on the play, right? We saw that clip. It's come out on Twitter where Travis Kelce was just I just ran my own route, and then Patrick Mahomes threw it on time to the magical route that Travis Kelce ran, which, by the way, if you've been watching for the last 3 years, not a surprise. It's very clear that happens a bunch. They have routes where they're just find the open space and he'll throw it to you. That's a route for them. So, that's pretty much it. If you're a Bears fan, I don't even know why you're sad. What did you expect to happen? That's the part that gets me. What did you think was going to happen in this game? You wanted points in the first half of the game? Weird. The Patriots, speaking of points, the Patriots played the Jets. I will say it was 15-10. This game had a lot of rain involved with it, and I think if it had not rained, this would have been the exact same football game because both of these teams suck on offense. So the Jets, let's call it like it is. Zach Wilson's setting back Mormons quite a bit, and they were already pretty far behind. He's setting them back. I can't tell you. I mean, if you're a Mormon in New York, I'm sure you got random New Yorkers coming up to you asking you for explanations all the time. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know why I wasted my time watching this game. Mainly, you know why I did? You know why I wasted my time? For the love of the game. And when I talk about the game, I mean the game of podcasting, because that's what people want to hear about when they come to this show. A 15-10 Patriots win over the New York Jets, right? The Patriots essentially, throughout the course of this game, knew every single offensive play the Jets were running. And it was very clear because there was multiple times where defensive linemen would beat blockers to the spot and just blow up run plays. They knew what the play was before the ball was getting snapped, and either the Jets didn't trust Zach Wilson enough, totally understandable if that's the case, or Zach Wilson didn't know that they knew what was going to happen, and he just let them get blown up. Zach Wilson self-sacked himself in the first quarter of this game at one point, and the worst part was when you look at the film, it looked like the pass protection for the Jets was lasting up to 5 seconds, which would have been the most time he's had in the pocket the entirety of this game, right? So I watched every single second of the Chiefs-Bears game, and I can safely say that game was far more entertaining than watching the Jets versus the Patriots. A Jets fan who had dentures in or replacement teeth, I'm sure you've seen it already. He was yelling so viscerally inside MetLife Stadium, which probably was echoing around all the empty seats that were in there as well. He had his false teeth fell out on national television, yelling at Zach Wilson after he essentially got scared running outside the pocket. He just tried to throw the ball away. He was like, I no longer want to be here. I want it to stop. And he threw the ball away, and he almost threw an interception to a defensive lineman. Oh, and by the way, congratulations to the Jets. They, coming into this game, 2 weeks into the season, had converted twice on third down, and in this game, they got 4 third down conversions. Congratulations to them. The Jets had a total of 37 total yards at the halfway point of this game. At the start of the fourth, they had 61. So the biggest thing to come out of this game is a really weird occurrence that happened on 4th and 1. I'm sure some people have seen it. There's some deniers out there. I'm not one of them. Mac Jones 100% tried to grab Sauce Gardner in the balls so that he would do something that would draw a personal foul. He pushed Mac Jones down. I'm going to point this out. The refs didn't throw the flag, and you know NFL refs, they'll do anything to throw a flag in a situation to give yards to an offense to make something happen, let alone in a game where I think at this point the game was 15-3 because they didn't score the touchdown until the fourth quarter, right? Tried to draw that 4th and 1 penalty in a game that they were leading by a lot, which is kind of sad. But now there's like a report that came out on Monday that they sent that evidence to the league office, which, by the way, I don't know why you sent it to the league office. They already have it, my guy. They know. They know that Mac Jones tried to grab Sauce Gardner in the balls. I doubt anything's going to come of it because Mac Jones is a quarterback. What do you expect to happen? I do like the fact that on that 4th and 1 play, they tried to QB sneak, and Mac Jones tried to do that thing that he did in the Pro Bowl where, like, very clearly everybody's playing by the two-hand touch rules or whatever. They two-hand tagged him, and he just kept running so he could do the gritty in the end zone or whatever, like 80 yards down the field so he can do the gritty in the end zone. And he just he was doing a QB sneak. He had very clearly already been stopped, and he kept running his feet forward, and Quinnen Williams was like, perfect opportunity to lift and throw Mac Jones into the ground. I support that. I support defensive players being violent to quarterbacks because there's very few times where they let you do it. You got to get those opportunities when you can, you know what I mean? We move on to actually games that were more entertaining in some way, shape, or form. The Heartbreakers. For some of you you may want to, change into another stream or change the channel, whatever you have. If you have me on your YouTube TV, appreciate you. Make sure like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that good jazz like that. Nonetheless, heartbreaker category. This one's pretty quick here. I don't know if you guys heard or not. The Denver Broncos finally scored over 20 points. Last season, the resounding stat was that if the Broncos had scored over 20 points in all their games throughout the course of the season, they would have been like 9-7 or like 10-6 or something, or 10-7 when it was all said and done and been a playoff team. Not even a wild card. They would have been a flat-out playoff team when it was all said and done, and they could not do that. Well, they finally scored over 20 points and then they lost by 50. So maybe we were wrong. Maybe it's on us. Maybe they scored too many points. That's the problem. They scored, no. The Dolphins scored too many points. So the Dolphins had over 700 yards, total yards in this game, because pretty much every single play that they ran became a touchdown. So this blowout was so bad that the Broncos are now surrendering 40 points a game. And nobody they're now averaging surrendering 40 points a game. The first 2 weeks of the season, they gave up, I think it's 28 or something like that. So, yeah, it almost doubled their average points surrendered. Would like to point out the last team to have over 700 yards in the NFL in a singular game was apparently a game with the New York Yanks and the old LA Rams. I went and looked up that game on Football Reference to try and figure out how an offense in the 50s could put up over 700 total yards. And it turns out Norm Van Brocklin was the quarterback in that game. If you don't know, he's like the Wilt Chamberlain of football in terms of like stupid records. He had a 500 passing yards and 5 touchdowns with 2 interceptions. They did not have as many rushing carries as I thought a team in the 50s would have, right? Maybe just maybe they were like cutting edge way back in the day. Anyway, speaking of cutting edge, it is, if you're the Broncos, you're trying to dip out of there as quick as possible, right? You're trying to get that season-ending injury, get that paper in terms of that injury, the injury guarantee that is in almost every single contract. They talked to some of the Broncos after the game was over with. One of them was like, I've been here for 7 years and all I've done is lose, which sounded very eerily similar. If he was not a white man, it would have been very eerily similar to all my life I had to fight. And saying something like that after you've been fighting your whole life, you've been getting your ass kicked, which, I feel like all of us can relate to the Denver Broncos in that fashion. I'm not going to talk about this game too much. This is the type of game that breaks your spirit in the sense that you're Sean Payton, who opened his mouth about Nathaniel Hackett, who, by the way, had a shit day as well. Let's be honest. Had a terrible day at his job as well, and said that he had one of the worst coaching jobs in the history of the NFL. You lose by 50. It happens, right? It happens to the best of us who run their mouths, right? Sean Payton, still a way better coach than Nathaniel Hackett was, without question. Mainly because of that rang, right? But for the most part, yeah, man. As a dude who picked the Dolphins to win the Super Bowl, I'm feeling pretty good right now. I know it's week 3, but, they hand out the Super Bowl in week 4, right? Now, that's what they've always done. They've always given the Super Bowl out in week 4. So, Dolphins leading the way. Not going to talk about this game too much more in terms of like the actual X's and O's on the field, but I will point out there's like a story going around about how Mike McDaniels was in line to get the Broncos job, and then they refused to interview him type of deal. So a lot of people talking about this like revenge. This game had a hint of revenge to it, and the 70 points on the board may or may not say that. But Mike McDaniels, being the ever troll that he is, he chose not to kick the field goal that would have given the Dolphins the all-time record in terms of points scored in a single football game of 73 because he's a nice guy. He said we didn't want to embarrass them. That's a good one. That's a good one, right? That's a good one, Mike McDaniel. By the way, 2 things to reference Pablo Torre is working with Metallock Media, so he's on the Dan Lebertard and Friends podcast network. Make sure you go check out his most recent episode. He talks to Nate Tice, who works for Pro Football Focus as an analyst, and he talks to Nate Tice about being Russell Wilson's backup QB and all their experiences when he was at Wisconsin. Really good podcast. Another thing in reference to this as well, Mike McDaniels was recently on the Pivot podcast with Channing Crowder, Fred Taylor, and Ryan Clark. Check that out. Really cool listen, all that jazz like that. Just thought I'd plug those. Anyway, way better than you going back and watching Dolphins Broncos from week 3. Even though it was historical, the Chargers took on the Minnesota Vikings. This game was heartbreaking, mainly because the Vikings were involved. So let's take it from the top. J.C. Jackson was a healthy scratch in this game, which if you're not familiar with that, that means that he was 100% perfectly fine, and they chose not to play him because they don't like the way he played football. That's essentially what they said, which is kind of wild because J.C. Jackson has one of the biggest contracts for a defensive back in the NFL. That's going to be a major problem down the line because if they expect him to keep not playing football, I feel like somebody in the accounting department may be a little upset about those the way the balance sheet is going to work out. Oh, Keenan Allen, by the way, you've heard of him? Really good, real shifty, tall dude. He's the greatest wide receiver in the history of the LA/San Diego Chargers. So today he had 18 catches, which is it is a franchise high, and he also has 215 yards. In this game, he threw a touchdown in it as well, but the 215 yards propelled him into number 1 all-time in the history of Chargers football in terms of receiving yards. So, yeah, he's just the GOAT. Witnessing greatness, live and in action. I have a strange feeling he's going to get a lot more attention later on this year, or starting next week and the week after that, because Mike Williams did end this game by tearing his ACL, which is really tough because, Mike has come a long way in terms of a wide receiver, in terms of making plays, getting open downfield, and where he started at Western Michigan to where he has become, a consistent and one of the deadliest threats in terms of the wide receiver game in the NFL is kind of amazing, right? By the way, the passing touchdown, found this out retroactively, is apparently it was redemption, like Brandon Staley talked about in the press conference after the game, where he was like, oh, the last time we played the Vikings, we had him run that play, and he underthrew Mike Williams, so they had him run the same play again. And that's a little risky to be focusing on getting redemption in a game that you only won by 4 points. I'd like to point out the Vikings, you know what, man? We'll talk about it. After I mentioned this weird thing that happened like early in the first quarter. So there's at one point, I think it's Justin Herbert's on the sideline. Oh no, it's Kenneth Murray on the sideline. His helmet, by the way, Kenneth Murray, a kid that I covered in high school too. He went to Elkins High School. I've actually interviewed Kenneth. He was really cool before he went to Oklahoma, and he's still cool now. I was just saying, I interviewed him when he was like a safety. Now he's a huge ass fucking linebacker in the NFL. But something happened with like the chin strap of his helmet or something after he blew up a Vikings running back. I want to say it was Alexander Madison on a flat route. Anyway, he blew somebody up on a flat route, got up, went over to the Chargers sideline, and the guy who went to go fix Kenneth Murray's helmet is apparently the high school equipment manager for Mark Sanchez when he was like it was legitimately like his high school equipment manager. And he's like on the broadcast, he'd be like, wait, is that Zach? That looks like the guy who was my equipment manager in high. It's so weird. It was so random, but it was also one of those things where like there's a growing collection of people who don't like Mark Sanchez as a broadcaster because he commits the cardinal sin of talking over the play-by-play guy while plays are going on, and then when he talks over them, he's not saying anything that actually adds to the broadcast, right? There's a lot of random noises, also some dad jokes that get really roped in there a ton. There is a lot of maybe trying to mimic Tony Romo a little too much in a year that we're coming off a year where people are kind of getting tired of last year people were a little frustrated with Tony Romo, and his broadcasting style has changed. If you've not heard, it has changed quite a bit from where it was in year one. Anyway, Mark Sanchez was even like calling out plays like right before they happened or whatever. So yeah, trying to do a little too much. You know what I mean? But yeah, it was really weird. He recognized his high school equipment manager on the Chargers sideline on TV. Weird shit that happened in this game. Justin Jefferson did not touch the ball. He wasn't even targeted in the first quarter. The Fox broadcast went to commercial and it said up next. This is a hashtag. This is very much for the people who are hashtag NFL rigged. It said up next Justin Jefferson because the Vikings were about to be on offense, right? And they do that thing where they have him walk down like a lit up tunnel in his uniform, and he has like a football and he's spinning it, and it looks like a movie trailer. It fades to black. They come back. The first two plays to start the second quarter for the Vikings drive were throws to Justin Jefferson, where he went from 0 catches, 0 yards to 2 catches for 54 yards. NFL rigged. Confirmed. Anyway, I thought it was pretty funny. I thought it was funny. They set it. It looked so set up. It was ridiculous, but it was some nice ass snags. I can't even lie. Asante Samuel Jr. was out there. He had his hands full, man. He was all over the place. He did everything but get an interception in this one. The Vikings defense, by the way, absolutely killed it in this one. There are there's 2 touchdowns in this game that you can make an argument that shouldn't be on the board, but they're the thin line between success and failure in the NFL, right? One was the double pass from Keenan Allen to Mike Williams, because there was still a DB who chose to run with Mike Williams down the field. Even after Keenan Allen caught the wide receiver end around, he just wasn't close enough to be able to stop Mike Williams. He was still in the frame. He was like 3 or 4 steps away, and he just couldn't close the gap, right? Keenan overthrew it to get it to Mike so he could run full speed and catch that in the end zone. And he still even got touched up after he got the ball, right? The other one is the touchdown that actually ended up winning the game for the LA Chargers. Rashad Evans, the defensive back for the Vikings, read a throw to Keenan Allen perfectly. And as he was fighting to get back in front of the defensive back and Rashad Evans, he was in trail position, turned his head around, had the ball bounce off both his hands, hit his shoulder pad, and land in... Oh, no, it wasn't Keenan Allen. I think it was Josh Palmer. Had it land in Josh Palmer's hands for a touchdown. Like, Josh Palmer was in the end zone. They were streaking down the left-hand sideline. Rashad Evans caught the underthrown pass, had it rattle around in his hands, bounce off his shoulder pad, and right to a Chargers wide receiver. That never happens. And it happened in the most, like, there's got to be some kind of fucking voodoo. I'm thoroughly convinced that whatever God Kirk Cousins sacrifices small children to is angry. So, or maybe he's a billy goat guy. You know what I mean? Maybe the goat that he sacrificed wasn't fresh enough. Who knows? That was ridiculous. There's a lot of really good Kirk Cousins plays. By the way, this is the worst part about it all. For a team that has won 0 games, the Vikings are playing significantly better than teams that have won games this season. They're playing better than the Jets by like a mile. They're playing better than the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that was projected to win the AFC South and is off to a little bit of a rough start. They're playing better than the Pittsburgh Steelers are, to be honest with you, because outside of those two crazy touchdown plays, and there's no telling what would have happened if those 2 plays had been, incompletions or whatever, and what would have happened after that. But nonetheless, they're 2 plays that, like, one is a freak thing in terms of the double pass, and the other one is a freak thing in terms of a deflection into the end zone, into a wide receiver's hands, with nobody around to make the tackle, even though it initially was an interception. Like, an interception goes from an interception to a touchdown almost in a joking fashion from whatever ultimate being is up there to fuck with things, right? That was the tough part. That was the tough part to swallow. The Vikings came with a plan. Too bad the Chargers' plan was a little bit better on offense. The Vikings' defense, like I said before, they did a really good job. They blitzed 80% of the defensive possessions they were out there on the field. Luckily, too bad for them. Justin Herbert has great chemistry with his wide receivers. There's a couple of plays where their pressure got to Justin Herbert less than a millisecond after he released the ball to throw it to Keenan Allen for like 9 yards. He ran multiple inside slants. He ran a couple glance routes. Yeah, working on my vocabulary. You heard it. Glance routes, he ran a couple of those and ran it right over the middle where the pressure was coming from the Vikings, and the ball was half a second away from being a sack, right? They got 0 sacks in this game, but they had Justin Herbert under a slight amount of pressure a good chunk of time, right? Great pass protection from the Chargers up front. Doubt they'll be meeting a team that's going to blitz them 80% of the time for the rest of the season to make up for the fact that they don't necessarily have like great individual pass rushers, right? But yeah, no, the Vikings defense, I felt like did a great job. They had a couple plays, especially in the secondary, where they were on it. And it was a bunch of guys, like I said before, Rashad Evans at the defensive back position was up against Keenan Allen a good chunk of the day. He had 18 yards. He had 18 catches, 215 yards, and 0 touchdowns, plus the fact they lost by 4 points, right? That was the tough part. Anyway, it at this point, it can't, like, bad luck can't swing back this hard, right? Like, all the good luck they had last season, they had bad luck the season before where they lost like 9 of their 16 games by 1 possession or less, right? And the way this game ends is the worst part of it all, right? Kirk Cousins gets them down to the 2-yard line. They get stuffed on 3 different run plays. They end up trying to go for it on 4th down. It gets swatted down. No, it gets intercepted because he throws at TJ Hawkinson. It bounces off his pads, and then Kenneth Murray dives from like 5 yards away and comes up with an interception in the end zone to get the touchback, right? So they don't even get the benefit of backing up the Chargers inside their own 1-yard line so they can get a decent punt off of it. They get the ball at the 25. They run the ball. The Vikings defense gets another stop on 4th and 1 where Alexander Mattison gets stood up completely. By the way, when are we going to start talking about maybe, just maybe, should have paid Dalvin Cook? The drive after that for the Vikings, this is the last drive of the game, starts off with a drop / slightly off target touchdown throw. KJ Osborne ran, it's not even a whip route, it's a stop and go, but it's a curl stop and go. So he ran, broke down like he was curling, then broke back up towards the field, beat his defensive back. Kirk Cousins throws it over his right-hand shoulder. He's running outside the right hash right towards the pylon, and KJ Osborne touches it with his hand and just can't come up with it, right? That happens, and on the opposite side of the field on the same play, Justin Jefferson tries to run an in route and messes up his foot in some way, shape, or form to the point where he's sitting on the turf for like 20 seconds. They burn a timeout because of an injury on this one, right? It's under 2 minutes. The next play, TJ Hawkinson runs, I want to say an in route on the left-hand side of the field because they're on the right hash. He gets lit the fuck up by Gilman, the safety for the LA Chargers. He gets crushed to the point where he's laying on the ground for like 30 seconds to a minute. They burn another timeout. I'm sorry, they only had 1 timeout left. They lost it because of Justin Jefferson being down because he was hurt, obviously. And then when TJ Hawkinson gets hurt, not only does he not come up with the catch because he got hit ridiculously hard, but he also, oh my God, man. But he also forces them into a 5-yard penalty because he was caught up in the injury timeout. The injury timeout rule is to prevent teams from having a bunch of people who get fake hurt, right? And just go down and buy time for the offense to be able to figure out what they're going to do. So he goes down, he has to go out of the play he has to go out for 1 play, gets an injury timeout. They come back in, it's 2nd and 15. They throw the ball to TJ Hawkinson on the following play. He's able to convert it, right? Turns it into that. I'm sorry, 2 plays later, it's 4th and 5, and then TJ Hawkinson runs the inside slant, catches it. The Vikings let the clock run because they don't have any timeouts left because of the injury timeouts. Kurt throws it, and it's deflected off 2 players, the defensive back and the wide receiver that it was intended for, and then Kenneth Murray ends the game by picking it off. Crazy, bro. There's no way that you can sit there and be like, that's normal shit. Half the things that happen to them are not normal at this point anymore. It's got to be some kind of voodoo, bro. It's got to be whatever God Kirk Cousins and his wife pray to. Anyway, moving on. Other heartbreakers. The Colts lost. The Colts beat the Ravens 22-19. If you don't know, this was the last 2 weeks we've seen a soft launch of Gardner Minshew at starting quarterback because Anthony Richardson has gone out and not been able to finish the last 2 games. If you recall, he in this game. He didn't make it out at all. Like they went from he missed most of the 4th quarter in game 1 of the season. Game 2 he missed the entirety of he missed 3 quarters, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And then in game 3 he just doesn't play at all, right? Because of concussion protocol. In this game, would like to point out, absolutely insane performance from Kyle Hamilton, ladies and gentlemen. 3 sacks in this game before the first half was over. Yeah, the Ravens the Ravens, like a lot of other teams in the NFL, are starting to use their defensive backs as extra blitzers to, 1, cover the run, and then 2, generate pressure off the edge that offensive linemen just can't backpedal faster than a defensive back can run forward, right? And then combine that with the fact that there's a defensive end that they have to block, it puts them in the catch-22. So Kyle Hamilton he had 3 sacks in this game on Gardner Minshew, right? And there was a good chunk of time where you're just kind of like, maybe we should just slide protect towards Kyle Hamilton. They were doing a really good job of disguising when he was blitzing. Also, they were crowding the line a bunch, and also when Kyle Hamilton wasn't blitzing, they were sending other people from other gaps. So it was creating a good amount of confusion, which is probably why the score was kept so low just in general, despite the fact that Zach Moss had himself one hell of a game, man. He was kind of cooking a little bit. By the way, speaking of running backs, Kenyon Drake starts off what becomes a cacophony of really weird ways that Ravens drives end. He fumbled the ball 2 minutes into the first quarter on the Ravens' second drive. The first drive the Ravens got, they scored on. They scored a touchdown. They would then not score again after they scored the touchdown on the first drive. They would not score again until the second half. And we'll get to that a little bit later on. Samson Ebukam, who is officially on pace for a career high in sacks of 14. He has 2 tackles for loss. His career high is 16. He's on pace for that as well. So he's moved on to another team and yet again overperforming for his expectation. When he was with the Rams, he had high expectations, performed pretty well. And when he was with the Niners, he did really well too. But their whole front 7 is pretty stacked. Not gonna lie, I felt like the Colts big-brained their way through this game. They used the run to keep the clock going, knowing that the Ravens were going to use the run to keep the clock going, so it accelerated and reduced the number of possessions overall. So you basically had to be able to hold on to the ball for a good chunk of time if you wanted to have any type of healthy offense, and they just couldn't do it, man. And like I said before, Zach Moss had the TD, and this went off a first touchdown in this game for the Colts off of a wheel route. Patrick Queen gets mossed in this one. No way to put it. He gets mossed, which I guess is just any play that involves Zach Moss or the other kind of mossed. One play later, the Ravens turn the ball over for the second time in the first half. Oh, weird thing that's been happening. Lamar Jackson keeps fumbling the ball. Stay tuned for more. The drive ends in a big brain battle, and it also ends the half, I think, as well, where I have it written in my notes. The Colts send out their field goal unit, and at the last second, they swap in the starting offensive line and Gardner Minshew. So they leave kicker Matt Gay to go split out at wide receiver to try and run. They try and run a trick play to get a touchdown out of this one, right? The Ravens call a timeout. The Colts run out the field goal unit again, and then halfway through the play clock, they run out the entire offense. They flip him out real quick, trying to catch the Ravens off guard, and the Ravens just don't engage in terms of signaling that they're ready to play football, because they're just going to have somebody walk onto the field very, very slowly and kill the play clock, because the second that you sub in the NFL, the other team gets the same amount of time to sub in their players in a reasonable amount of time, and that's determined by the umpire. That's why you'll see sometimes they'll say the ball was not set ready for play because of a substitution, and they'll have a umpire stand in front of the ball. And it's also why hurry up offense is so important for some teams, because once they get the personnel mismatch that they wanted on the field, they just won't sub anybody on and off the field, because they want to continue to have the personnel mismatch all the way down on the drive. Yeah, the Colts tried to do that, and then the Ravens were like, oh, look at that. Magically, our big hulking defensive tackle can only walk 2 miles an hour. And then they got a delay of game. They killed the last 8 seconds of the play clock. And the Ravens win the big brain battle to end the half. They kick a field goal. The Ravens lost 3 possessions in the first half. They had 2 that they lost off of a fumble, and 1 they lost off of a low snap on third down. It was 3rd and 5, and like I said before, it was raining a little bit in this game. It feels like every home game the Ravens have had, the weather's been shit, but it was 3rd down. They snap it. it goes into the ground, and Lamar Jackson just has to jump on top of it, and it becomes 3rd and like 20 or 4th and 20. So they punt the ball away, right? After scoring on their first drive in the first half, the Ravens do not score any points again until there's 13 seconds left in the third quarter. You tell me if that's a sign of a good offense, right? Oh, they randomly played Burning Up by the Jonas Brothers during one of the punt returns. I thought that was weird. I wrote that down. The Ravens legit couldn't move the ball on their final drive. Justin Tucker gets a field goal attempt for the win, and the broadcaster says there is no point in icing Justin Tucker because he's so good that he just like doesn't miss. And then he missed. So, yeah, classics. The classics, right? The Ravens force a 3-and-out, and then they get a massive punt return that gets them into Colts territory. They end up with a 3rd and 6. Lamar Jackson throws a pass to Zay Flowers. It's behind him and incomplete. Tough. Zay Flowers running too fast. By the way, Zay Flowers still really good at football. The Ravens don't let Tucker try to kick what I think was like a 57-yard field goal, because he missed the 61-yarder, right? 2 possessions later, the Ravens lose possession off of the only missed pass interference call in the history of the NFL. Zaire Franklin jumps on Zay Flowers' back as he's running an in route out of his zone. I think they were running like cover 3 or cover 2 or something. And Zaire Franklin sees Zay Flowers cut in behind him. He's tracking him. He jumps on his back. He pre-orders a tackle. Like, it's pretty obvious because Zay Flowers drops before he falls to the ground before he even touches the ball. And they're like, oh, whatever. First time I've ever seen that in an NFL game. Matt Gay becomes the first kicker in NFL history to make 4 50-yard plus field goals in a single game because he kicked the game winner, and the Colts win 22-19. And if you thought the Colts defense was good, Zaire Franklin is so good so far this season. He is got 29 solo tackles through 3 games. Crazy. Talk about other heartbreakers. The Packers played the Saints. The worst part about this one is the Saints scored in some unconventional ways. They only scored 1 offensive touchdown in this game. You can tell by the score, right? So let's break it down. Take it from the top. The Packers defense played like a top 5 defense in the NFL. They only gave up 17 points, which is ridiculously good, right? They played like a top 5 defense in the NFL. Their pass rush was ridiculous, so ridiculous that they hurt Derek Carr and forced Jameis Winston into the game. The score at halftime for this game was 17-0. The pressure that the Saints were generating, plus the fact that, look, man, they got Marshawn Lattimore, and Alontae Taylor is very quickly becoming, a really good number 2 to Marshawn Lattimore. He was on fire in this game. The Packers really couldn't get the connection going that they needed in the run game. In the passing game whatsoever. And so it set the run game up for failure for the most part because the defensive line for the Saints was playing just immaculate, violent football up front. They were generating a ton of pressure, so it reduced the time that Jordan Love had to find people who were open. And the Saints were also running a bunch of man coverage, which don't see that too often in the NFL. Zone coverage has always been on the rise, or zone man concepts have been on the rise for a long time. But yeah, that's pretty much it. They basically, the offense just like went out for lunch the second half of this game, and the Packers in the last 7 minutes of the fourth quarter were able to come back due to the offense finally being able to complete like more than 2 passes in a row, right? That helped a bunch. And then the Packers defense continuing to do what they've done the entire game. They were able to turn it up a little bit. Jordan Love finally pieced it together and got a couple of good drives and a field goal to win this game when it was all said and done. And the Packers continued their 11-game home win streak. They started, by the way, weird part of this game, they started off by running a double pass play. So it went from one running back who threw the ball back to Jordan Love. And when Jordan Love tried to plant his foot to step forward to throw, he basically did the splits and his knee went funny for a second because the grass was a little weird. And I can't imagine what Matt LaFleur saw flashing before his eyes as it looked like Jordan Love may be done for the season for a second. Anyway, he gets up, walks off. Must be nice to be young. Jimmy Graham, by the way, scored the only offensive touchdown for the Saints in this game. They had a punt. The Saints had a punt return touchdown from Raheed Saim. Rented back. It was pretty cool looking. But Jimmy Graham went 8 years between scoring touchdowns for the Saints. So the first time he was with the Saints, with your boy Drew Brees, he scored a touchdown, and then today or last Sunday he scored a touchdown, and it was 8 years and like some days, 8 years and like 4 weeks and 3 days or something like that. Oh yeah, by the way, just in case you didn't know, Jimmy Graham back with the Saints. There you go. Just your free reminder for the people who are like, what do you mean Jimmy Graham? I thought he retired years ago. He did not. He was playing for the Packers last year, and now he's playing for the Saints this year. The Saints offense scored one offensive touchdown, like I said. Not great. Jameis Winston really struggled to complete any type of passes. A lot of that due to the pressure from one Rashawn Gary, who had a 3-sack game. Guy used to former number 1 overall football recruit in the country, was a 5-star, right? And actually is like living up to the hype when it was all said and done. Pretty dope. I'm not gonna talk about anything else that was man. Oh, the saddest part. The Saints continue their streak of holding opponents under 20 points in a singular game. They have now done it 11 straight games. Yeah, and they still lost, right? That's a tough one. Speaking of heartbreakers, last one, the Browns played the Titans like a fiddle. The Browns are in competition for number 1 defense in the NFL with the 49ers, in my opinion, and it showed. I thought the Titans will be able to generate a lot more pressure than they did in the course of this game. A lot of people still trying to lie to themselves about Deshaun Watson kind of looking good. He doesn't look terrible, which goes a long way, right? Especially when you're a team that, 1, can be led by the run game, and then 2, has a defense to go along with it. But at some point, the guy that you paid literally the most money in the NFL to, he got to do his job. I'll be interested to see when that starts. You let me know. But yeah, the Browns defense basically carried them to this one, man. They were in Ryan Tannehill's ass this entire game. This probably was worse than the Saints game. So this is yet another elite level defense that the Tennessee Titans have faced off against in the first 3 weeks of the season. And I don't think too many other teams that, let's be real, the Titans are maybe a wild card contender, but for the most part, like, not too much going on there in terms of like looking at Super Bowl contender or even playoff team contender when it's all said and done. But the Browns are a team with a lot of high hopes for a living. They got some key games coming up, and for some reason we find ourselves yet again another year passes, and the AFC North still has ridiculously stupid good defenses all over the place. Let's go to the "This is what we're here for" category, and is that the "Oh my" category? I don't know why I did that. The "Oh my" category. The Texans beat the Jaguars. So this is like the highest scoring Texans game in, I want to say, a year and a half, if I remember off the top of my head. The Jacksonville Jaguars supposed to be winning the AFC South. For those of you who don't know, there's like a couple of things that historically happen for the AFC South. The Texans go to Indianapolis and they lose. Nobody talks about it, but the home Colts record versus the Texans is like so ridiculously lopsided, it doesn't make sense why they even put it up in sports books. The Jaguars, when the Texans go to Jacksonville, weird shit always happens. So this was not surprising to me as a person perpetually trapped in the AFC South. And then the other one is the Jaguars beat the shit out of the Titans beat the shit out of the Jaguars on Thursday Night Football when they play them. No matter what stadium it is. Those are like the three, that and taxes are like the things that are guaranteed to exist. So the Texans in this one, basically the whole offensive line is done. Like, it's out, right? Had a backup center last week. Laramie Tunsil didn't play in this game. He was declared out, I think, like the Thursday before the game type of deal. Almost complete backups. We talked about it last week. There was a moment versus the Colts, even though the Colts were like running away with it. There were some times where you felt like the Texans were kind of piecing it together, kind of moving forward, and this was a prime example of them finally putting it together. God damn, it took so long. This is a huge win. This is a huge win overall for the Texans because it was looking good on the offensive and defensive side, which I haven't been able to say in a long, long time. So, but yeah, up front, CJ Stroud still has not thrown an interception. Everybody's talking about that. They're going to talk about it until they're blue in the face because there hasn't been like some massive plays that you can just sit back and be like, look at how amazing. Like there hasn't been any Anthony Richardson level plays where you're just like, look at him break all three of these tackles and just kind of like mosey on into the end zone, right? But nonetheless, this was real high-level domination. The Jacksonville Jaguars are one of the lowest-scoring teams in the NFL this season, and I know it's only week 3. They're going to catch their stride and everything like that. They got to change some things up, obviously. But nonetheless, this is a huge win for the Texans if they want to take a step towards being a playoff team. Just something to think about. 1-2 on the season. Speaking of taking steps towards being a playoff team, the Arizona Cardinals played another NFC East team and made them look silly, except they finished the game this time. So you could have sworn that this game was like 40-3 with the way people were talking about it online, but the Cardinals played the Cowboys and they did what they did versus the Giants, except they played defense in the fourth quarter the whole time. So the Cardinals run game somehow just as good as the Eagles. Don't know how Josh Dobbs has that perfect blend of willing to throw it down the field and also making sure that he doesn't turn the ball over, which of course puts a nail in pretty much any, like the margin of error is so thin for the Cardinals, it's ridiculous, right? But yeah, that was pretty much it when it was all said and done. The Cardinals run game dominated versus the Cowboys, which is really weird because they're coming off a week where they lost their number 1 cornerback, but somehow are getting terrible results in the run defender game. And combine that with the fact that they're supposed to have one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, that game looked eerily similar to the last like 5 games of the regular season that the Cowboys had last year. It's a problem. It's a big problem. Obviously, take it with a grain of salt. It's also really funny because every time the Cowboys go to Arizona, the stadium is filled with Cowboys fans, and they usually beat the shit out of the Cardinals when they do that kind of situation. So it's really funny that all those Cowboys fans spent all that money on a Cardinals game and just go watch your team get their ass beat. So, yeah, the Eagles played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're doing that weird thing. So, this is my pitch. This is my idea. You tell me what you think. I think the Eagles are playing a game. I think they're playing a game of how can we find different types of offenses. I think the Eagles understood that in the Super Bowl and at some points during the playoffs, they kind of got a little stagnant, right? And so they're using the regular season to find different ways that their offense can be successful before kicking it into steamroller mode, before they become like just the big old Tonka truck where they're just flattening out the road into a smooth gravel path to victory, right? Where they just run the team over. Like the DeAndre Swift thing has now worked 2 weeks in a row without any question or hesitation. What I'm pitching to you, and you tell me if I sound insane, they're trying to figure out different types of RPOs that work up front to give the same formation look in the first half and then change what happens to it or change what happens during that formation in the second half, right? The benefit of forcing a team to have to adjust to what you do gives you more time to put points on the board. Because it felt like the last 2 weeks, it just felt like the Eagles have been trying to do everything in their power but do the power run thing up the middle and dominate the team, which they could do at any given point, right? It felt like they could do that on Thursday Night Football at any given point versus the Vikings, but they were struggling a little bit, and A.J. Brown kind of got a little frustrated. They're trying to find more ways to get your boy Jalen Hurts to distribute the ball further deeper down the field that don't involve like bomb plays, right? They're trying to find ways to shift defenses to focus on the run first and set up the pass afterwards, right? That's what a Super Bowl contender is trying to do. That's the habits of a Super Bowl contender if I've ever seen one. Anyway, very interesting to see how that all shook out. I thought that was extremely interesting because it was pretty obvious that it felt like they were kind of toying around with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. By the way, Buccaneers, if you told me they go out and they win the NFC South, I believe you. They got a lot of things going for them, man. Baker Mayfield, for whatever people have to say, first 2 weeks of the season was looking pretty good. Third week, not so much. And the Buccaneers still got like a really top-flight defense, which is impressive considering that Mike Edwards, who's one of their better defensive backs for the last like 4 years, is no longer there. So, yeah. moving on. Just thought I'd point that out. Moving on, there's only one game that I had in the This Is What We're Here For category, and it was the Seahawks-Carolina Panthers game. It was a high-scoring affair. There was a lot of really cool plays. Zach Charbonnet with some really violent tendencies. Shout out to Sam Franklin III. I know he got lit up on, they put him on the NFL Instagram account. But the fact of the matter is, he had a really good game playing defense up front when it came to playing defensive back, right? He got blown up multiple times throughout the game, but shout out to Pete Carroll for holding the torch of fuck those nerds, we're going to run the ball with our guys who are bigger. Would like to also point out, Seahawks, a lot of backup offensive linemen played in this game, and they still were able to be pretty successful against a Panthers defense that in the first 2 weeks of the season has shown that they got a lot of pass rush going for them, right? We talked about it last week on Streaks, Peaks, and Ditches. They have 4 sacks in each of the first 2 games of the season. 8 sacks over 2 games. That's a lot of pressure, right? Other than that, man, the Seahawks kind of did their thing. Kenneth Walker II dominated this game. Dominated up front in the run game and in the pass game. Geno Smith looked like he was a lot more comfortable in this second time around. I don't know if that's because the pass protection was a lot better, or if he had just a little bit more faith. But combine that with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Kenneth Walker, even getting to see some distribution to the tight ends. Like Parkinson had a couple of big catches. They didn't have Will Dissly, which opened up Noah Fant being able to get some more catches. That is all possible because the defense has been doing their thing, man. Like they have surrendered historically a ton of passing yards throughout the first 3 games or whatever. And other way around. I don't know why they have prevented historic high. They didn't have Tariq Woolen in this game. They didn't have Kobe Bryant. They didn't have Jamal Adams, and they still did a pretty good job. Like there was moments where, look, let's be for real, Andy Dalton, there's a couple bullets left in that rifle, man. He did a really good job of staying calm, especially when he was under pressure. Nwosu did a good job. And this is the cool part about, Nwosu is like a 10-sack kind of guy, right? And he just signed a huge extension. Love the way Nwosu helps with the run defense. Like they don't put it all on the linebackers to go out there and make the play. He blows up run plays pretty consistently, and it doesn't feel like he's just a Yannick Ngakoue, a guy who's solely focused on going out there and doing run defense. And I like that a lot, especially when it comes to playing defense as a unit, when you got help from everybody and it's not just a couple of people here and there, it's the whole unit going out there and doing their thing. Just like Bobby Wagner drops back and he floods everywhere. Jordan Brooks had another really good game overall. The Seahawks are looking good. That's all I really got to say, man. That's pretty much all I got. I got one more thing. Let's talk Thursday Night Football. The Packers are taking on the Lions. This is a huge NFC North battle. My money is on the Lions because I feel like they've been more consistent on both sides of the ball, right? The Packers' consistency has been on the defensive side of the ball. There's no question whatsoever the Packers' defense has come to play every game this season so far. But last 2 games for the offensive half, you talk about the game versus the Falcons, the whole last second possible Saints win. And that's only possible because their defense did such a good job of shutting down the Saints up front, which is not going to happen because the Saints were already a struggling offense that was playing up against a top tier defense, right? That's not going to happen with the Lions, bro. For the most part, from what we understand. Very interested to see the kind of pressure the Packers can generate versus the Lions up front. That is intriguing, an intriguing proposition, if you will, because Jared Goff, he's got 1 interception on the season. He even has a rushing touchdown to go along with it. The Lions' offense seems to get weirder and weirder as they get further out from week 1. They're mixing things up all the time to give as many looks as possible. They've already made a distinct promise to give Jahmyr Gibbs more carries, and it's panned out for him so far, right? And I have to imagine that that's not going to stop anytime soon. They're finding their weapons, man. Sam Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown, even Khalif Raymond up front as well, and then Jahmyr Gibbs being added to the mix. And when they get Montgomery back, they'll be even deadlier. They're getting better overall. And the Packers seem like they have moments of absolute brilliance. None of those moments seem like they are continuous stream throughout the course of a game. And so I'll bank on the team that's more consistent, especially on a Thursday Night Football matchup like we got going on here. With that being said, I got to go play some basketball. Y'all need to go do something else that's not listening to my podcast. I appreciate everybody who does that. By the way, hit me up on Twitter, FB_playbook. Follow me on Instagram at TheAshtonForever. Make sure you like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. Drop your comments. What was your least favorite thing, your favorite thing, and the thing you thought was weird that happened this week what happened in week 3. Give me your predictions for week 4. You drop them in the comments, and I'll read them on the next episode, I promise. All right, later. Oh, sorry. Wash your hands, wash your ass. And most importantly, go home, Roger.